Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Edward, aka ProgHat, and I am back with a Beatles ranking video. That's correct. I've seen folks out there doing these ranking the Beatles albums, and the only video I honestly watched, it was Glenn Calloway from The Basement. And so really he inspired me. I'm like, okay, I'll do one, right? But before I begin, I want to mention that I believe today is the birthday of George Harrison. Rest in peace, George. Been a fan of him for, as far as my favorite Beatle, Paul McCartney's my favorite Beatle. But as far as guitar players, I've always said that George Harrison is my favorite guitar player. Doesn't get enough credit in my opinion. In fact, a few months ago, I did a thread video where I was encouraging those to show their five favorite, just five favorite George Harrison albums. Here's was the response. 0. I was the only one, well, one, but yeah, hey, that's cool. That's the way it goes. But yeah, I got inspired one day and I said, you know what? Show some George Harrison albums. I know there's fans out there, there's a lot of Beatles channels that say they're fans. So, and another thing I want to mention before I do my Beatles ranking video is in the early 2000s, I don't get this, and I'm going to tell you what I don't get. I used to listen to a lot of these Beatle podcasts, folks, but then, and these were like the newer group, or whatever you want to call them, Gen whatever, .001, I don't know. They would do, they would take a Beatles album and rank the songs on it, right? But what they did was they sounded like they hated the whole Beatles album. So the whole goal was to I guess, to show that not every Beatles song, not every Beatles album is great. I don't get it. It became that I felt like it was a waste of my time. So I don't listen to those anymore. I wouldn't even listen to ones about the Who. We're in a new generation, new people, and everything's an argument, and everything is it's not that great, and here's why. They would go on and say things like Ringo's singing is terrible, Paul McCartney's bass is behind the music, all these little things. Roger Daltrey sounds off key, and I'm like, we listening to the same record? I mean, I don't care, but anyway, let's get into my Beatles ranking. Most of it, I went with the UK versions from the Beatles collection here, with one German pressing, because I love the album Magical Mystery Tour. I do. And I love everything about it. It has a lot of sentimental value, as well as Let It Be does. Okay, so let's begin here, and I'm gonna probably go through this quick, but let me get organized. Sorry about this, folks. Okay, here's one that I have at the bottom. Let me see how many Beatle records I have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pretty much 6, 7. Yeah, so I'm starting at the bottom. At the bottom here, Abbey Road. It's a great album, but that's where I have it ranked. Okay, I mean, you gotta have a bottom to number one. I mean, that's just the way it goes. The next one, Please Please Me. And I will mention that my favorite song from this is Misery. I love that song. And and There's a Place. 2 favorite songs of mine from here. Next, Sergeant Pepper, a classic. I agree with Glenn. This album is a masterpiece. You're not going to ever hear another band, I think, make an album like this. That's a plain fact. One of my favorite songs that I love to hear on here, and a lot of times I start with side 2 with George, is Within You, Without You. Great song. Next. Hard Day's Night. I love everything. This is just pure pop, power pop genius of the Beatles. There's so many great songs on here. But if I was going to name a couple on here, it's Things We Said Today and I'll Be Back. Those are 2 good songs. Next. With the Beatles. My grandmother had it as known as Meet the Beatles, how I was introduced by playing her American copy, Meet the Beatles. Honestly, I prefer the UK, but I still have the US copies as well. This is such a good record with classic tunes, even if folks don't want to hear them doing the remakes or whatever they want to say about it. But Not a Second Time, Money, and Don't Bother Me, a George Harrison classic. With the Beatles. Next. You can bear it. This is a hard album to photograph to post on Instagram. I don't know why it is for me, but the White Album. Just a great, great record. I'm glad they made it. I know there's all this talk about how George Martin didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I'm glad we have a double album from the Beatles. Dear Prudence is one of my favorite tunes. Next, I consider this a Beatles album. That's just my opinion. Yellow Submarine, or Yellow Submarine soundtrack. This has 2 iconic George Harrison songs. Only a Northern Song and It's All Too Much. And when I think about it, side 2, George Martin, I love that side. To me, he's the 5th Beatle, if you want to say that, or however you want to say it these days. I don't know. I don't even know what's Beatle politically correct anymore. And I don't care to. But yeah, this is a good album. I like that. Beatles for Sale. I love the cover. Yes, the Beatles look tired and of everything. They were pumping out singles. They were pumping out albums. They were a hit machine. One of my favorite songs on this whole album, I love I'm a Loser. That is such a great song. And what are we left here? We're getting to the 1, 2, 3. Okay, the top 5. So at number 5 with ProgHat is Help. Oh, this whole album is great, and I love that the Beatles have acoustic songs. They're very good at playing the acoustic guitar. One of my favorite tunes on here is Ticket to Ride and I've Just Seen a Face. Number 4, Rubber Soul, and I think I've been hearing that they're going to come out with a super deluxe or whatever, deluxe or 2 CDs and plus a calendar, whatever edition of this. I hope they really do. I may try to go ahead and get, because it's such one of my favorite records. I'll never forget how my grandparents gave me a US copy of that album for my birthday. Okay, down to the number 3, Revolver. I love it. She Said, She Said. And Your Bird Can Sing. Number 2, I went with my German pressing, which I think is a very good sounding stereo. Got this at a record show. Number 2 with me is Magical Mystery Tour, and this is a German pressing, and it sounds really good. The stereo mixes, in my opinion, are real good on this. And number 1 with me, ProgHat, is Let It Be. I love the way it is. Whether there's folks think that it has imperfections, whatever they think. To me, this is a rock solid album with me. I have a lot of sentimental connection with this album. My mom didn't make very much money, and she took the last bit of her money and she saw how excited I was when I found this album and a clearance bin when I was a kid and living in Houston, Texas, and she bought it for me. And I went straight to the turntable when we got home and played it. I thought it was cool. Of course, this is not the US where it's the Red Apple, but this is my all-time favorite Beatles album. I got 2 shirts of Let It Be. My brother hooked me up with the deluxe edition of Let It Be. I like everything about it. I finally got to see the documentary. That's the only way you can see it. And I enjoyed every bit of it. It was just so good. It seemed like things started to really come together with the song-wise is when they moved back into the studio. That's the part of that documentary I like. I'm still thinking about getting it, but someone was so kind in the VC and sent me a copy of the original on DVD of Let It Be, and I enjoyed the original. That's the way I saw it. I used to have it on VHS tape, and I watched it over and over. Me and my brother watched it over and over, and of course, being guitar players that we are, me and him, we're always trying to see what they're doing on the fretboard, where they're at, you know, get an understanding of the song. Because back then there was no tablature, there was no YouTube, there was no, you know, a lot of things now that people become these instant guitar players. There was none of that. There was like really, you know, getting down and, okay, I'm going to give it a shot, hear my ear. Hey, play that song over on the record. Let's start it from the beginning. That's where we had fun. It was a lot of fun, great memories. That's my ranking of the Beatles albums. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon.